On this reprise episode from Season 1 of The Next Interview, you'll hear Bill Holzendorf explain why the strongest teams aren't built through control. They're built through trust, accountability, and leaders who genuinely care about people. You'll discover how great leaders create growth, loyalty, and lasting impact.
I wanted to release this episode with Bill Holzendorf, which was episode 8, kind of way back in October of 2024 when my podcast first started. And as I was marching towards episode 100, which is coming up here pretty quick, and preparing for episode 93, I felt that this episode, which is one of my personal favorites, would be really great to re-release to everybody. And as in this episode, Bill and I talk about trust, we talk about accountability, we talk about our careers together and things that we experience working together. But even more importantly, we talk about how relationships extend beyond the company you're working for. And Bill and I have known each other for a long time. And you'll hear that in this episode. So I want you to challenge you to listen to this episode. Take some notes as you're going along on the value of relationships, the value of gratitude, and how trust evolves into a lifelong experience. Let's get to the episode.
So welcome to the Next Interview podcast. This week, I am excited to bring you this conversation with the gentleman who is on the screen to my right, who is Bill Holzendorf. And Bill and I have known each other for veritably for decades. Literally through multiple lives and multiple things. So I'm blessed to have you here. Thanks and we've had a long enough relationship that you will hear me refer to him as dude. So dude, thank you for being here on the call. Thank you for being on the Next Interview. I am grateful for you, man.
Thanks for having me, Doland.
Yeah, always a pleasure. So the intention for the podcast is short form podcast, 20-25 minutes. And so I've got a bunch of questions and about 2 hours worth of questions I can ask you that will jam into 20 minutes. But I wanted to just start with, for those who are going to see the podcast and they're meeting you for the first time today, and just an opportunity to kind of talk about your couple of minutes on your career, kind of how you started, where you started, and then grew into leaders, because I view you as a leader of leaders. So this is I'll pass it over to you and stop talking.
All right, and I'll make it pretty quick. My career started after school at a little company called EDS. That was a very technical position at the time. It was coding in COBOL and JCL and C-List. It took me about 2 weeks to figure out that I probably wasn't the smartest guy in the room. So I went back to school and got my MBA and decided to go the career path of helping guide and direct these really smart people. So the lion's share of my career has been in some kind of leadership position, acknowledging, I think, and self-aware of what my strengths and what my weaknesses were, and doing the best I could to empower those that had those really great skills technically down the path to success in their careers.
That's very cool. And there's a lot of mileage in that very short introduction. I'll just say there's a lot of mileage in that for all the experiences we had together. And it's kind of funny because one of the things that I have talked about before is in your career, and you can pick this path where you can become an expert, like in a narrow niche, and get really good at something this wide, or you can take your experience there and pivot, which is a decision to make a career pivot, and do more with helping other people grow their careers and become better leaders, which can, transcends into family and friends and all kinds of, it's not just about business. So
exactly.
Yeah. So that's one of the things I think that went in it. So I know that I'll give an example of a story on how we met, and then I'll kind of ask you for the sake of what, kind of why you were doing those things. Years and years ago, we actually cohabitated inside of a company called Novell, and I was the services guy, and you were in high level support for clients. And our client at the time was Toyota, and I can mention them by name because all of those people have moved on. So it was Toyota. And one of the things that we did together was I recognized the value of when you were delivering services to a client to give them, it's not just about delivering services and going home, but teaching them how to fish and giving them support. And so we engaged, and we had one of the support folks from your team. And one day on my porch showed up this giant box that was a picnic basket. And my wife was thrilled that we got this picnic basket from some guy named Bill Holzendorf, who and some co-affiliate named Val Wilding, I think, was involved in the process as well. But from some guy named Bill Holzendorf, and we reached out and met, and then ultimately became friends and coworkers. So it struck me kind of through that one of the lessons that came out of that was just an example of gratitude, just a thank you.
Yeah, and it is, Dolan. It's gratitude. I think if you go a little bit deeper than that, we've talked about it earlier, but as you get into, the twilight of your career, as you and I kind of are, and you look back, my career I've been at 6 companies, 5 of which were just through acquisition and kind of organically. But of those 6 companies, one still exists. And I feel fortunate in my life that I recognized early on in my career that it was about the journey and it was about the people. And if I look back now, all those companies we worked so hard to build, they're all gone. But the relationships, the friendship you and I have for each other, the love we have for the peers that we've worked with, Israel Forrest, and there's a bunch of names we could throw out there. But, we look back and these are 30-year relationships that were built, working really, really hard together to, yes, build these companies and try to meet goals and objectives. But again, when you put it back in perspective, it's about the people. So when people do things for you, in the case of this basket, I also believe I recognized early in my career that you loved what you were doing, Dolan. And I know you were putting a ton of hours and you were having fun, but I know it wasn't as fun for Linda. Right? You being gone, flying around the globe, doing what you're doing, and Linda's at home, taking care of all the things at the home so that you can do that. And it's caring for your people, but it's caring for their loved ones as well. And, I've just found if you really want to build, loyalty, unity, single one in purpose and drive, you've got to understand your managers, your employees beyond themselves and their role, but really start to understand, what their life is about and try the best you can to make sure that their loved ones understand how much you're appreciated and how much they're appreciated for their contribution.
Yeah, that's cool. I'll have a question about that, but it is interesting that I think, I think that's we all, when we're in relationships with our family, we're all more than just a person showing up to work. Way more than that. And it's funny, I was talking to a client the other day and we were talking about work-life balance. And I said, there's no work-life balance. It doesn't, that's a bad statement. It is life balance. It's like, what do you do? This is all life. It's like, what are you doing, right? With your life, and how are you getting better, and who are you taking care of? So I appreciate that comment. And I think that's a really important thing for people to know, is that it's not about the people who report to you. It's through that individual to the other side of their life, right? Who is in their life, and who are they taking care of, and what needs and wants and desires do they have? So when one of the things you were a master at was kind of uncovering some of those things. So there are a lot of new people who are coming into leadership who don't have the experience about trying to figure out what's important to other people. If you could think of maybe 1 or 2 things, off the top of your head that can be used as a tip for someone to explore. So get to know more about that person. How, what would you recommend to somebody new coming in?
Yeah, I think it's spending time and being in the moment when you're having those conversations with your employees. I find it, often, when relationships and positions don't work out for individuals, that often happens at the interview process. You may not realize it until 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a few months later. But, for me, it's during the interview process, make sure that you're asking not personal questions, because, we don't want to get too deep into that, but probing questions to really understand who that individual is and kind of, they say don't sit where you stand, right? And so I'm going to take a stand and this is how I feel now. I'm not going to sit there. I can be moved, right? And so when I interviewed, I often like to ask questions that I know the answer is wrong. It just hypothetically, hey, as a manager, when an employee makes, 2 strikes, I think they're out. Yeah. How do you feel about that? Well, if you agree with me on that, you're probably not the right manager, right? So I want people that are going to question me, people that are going to think different than me. Yeah. I remember hiring a CSM, I think he was, but Mike Reed. And he and I, when he was in another organization, we just butted heads. And when I offered him a job, he's like, I can't, I applied, but I can't believe you offered it, Bill. And he said, why? And it was because, look, you don't just go along with everything we say, right? You're pushing the needle. You're questioning my thought process. And I think as leaders, we can look and say, hey, I've got 30 years of experience, but guess what? I've got 5 managers, 10 managers that each have 20 years of experience. Yeah. So that's 200 years against mine. And it's being, going into projects with a plan of how to execute. But again, don't sit where you stand and be willing to listen to your people and understand that they bring different perspectives. And we're not always right as leaders, right? We're paid to kind of play that role. But the reality is we're as good as the team, right?
Yeah. That's really strong. So when you're in that spot, right, and you're and you want to be challenged, I think a lot of leaders coming in, and I think a lot of leaders who've never dealt with it. Forget the new people coming in; it's all leaders really, and they're concerned that, hey, look, I've got to appear to be right because I've got somebody up here above me, right? I sit in this kind of chewy nougat layer, so I've got a CEO or a founder or somebody, and I've got people underneath me, and I want these people, hypothetically underneath me, we're all kind of equals, but hypothetically, right, hierarchically, I want them to challenge me, and I want them to think about it. But they have fear in their mind around, but what if something goes sideways, right? This guy's going to get up, this person above me is going to get upset. I might lose my job or something else, something punitive is going to happen. So how do you take steps to avoid that feeling of of being willing to take the risk? And a lot of it comes down to trust, right? So how do you build confidence to be willing to take that risk?
It's trust, but it's also, Dolan, making sure that, one, you're giving the individual, giving them confidence that you're right, that you trust them. But number 2, it's okay. It's okay to make mistakes. Look, I've made my unfair share, right, of mistakes, and it's okay to make those. Yeah. And as a leader, we're going to back you on those. We're going to learn together. We're not going to make that same mistake twice, but we're going to make mistakes and we're going to grow as a result of that. And I think if it's like the old story of, you're out to dinner with your wife and she's, her water spills. What do you tell the waiter? That, hey, I'm sorry, my wife spilled her water? Or is it, excuse me, we spilled our water, right? And it's being in it together as a team. Yeah. And it's, hey, we made this mistake. They may have made the call, but hey, I empowered them to make that call. Therefore, we made the mistake together. We're going to learn from it. We're going to fix it. And if you can give that kind confidence to your employees. I will say anecdotally, employees, they do not I never had an employee that woke up in the morning and said, I want to fail, right? So you empower them, you support them. And, I look back at my career and the things that people did, it amazes me to this day, how they got so much done with so little on such a short period of time with the information they had. You're just like, and people will surprise you. They really will.
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny. And I think it's the same thing. I think as a leader, I can never remember a single day getting up thinking today would be a really good day for everything not to work. Today I'm going to fail. And I'm going to go do it. I'm going to fail as hard and fast as I can today. Cause we're just not cut that way. I think as we're working with the team, and I think a lot of teams, it's funny, Bill, cause I think in a lot of cases, teams can smell that on us. So they know when they're working with a leader that is going to have their back when something does go sideways, and things do go sideways. Every day something goes sideways. There's unplanned stuff. And I think that's a really, really important thing is the team needs to know that you've got their back. So.
Yeah. And it is, Dolan, and don't confuse it. We don't want to confuse that with, when typically there will be exceptions, but typically when an employee fails to the point that they're no longer able to, do the job, in my mind, it's as much my fault as it is maybe their fault, right? Because they're in the wrong role. Like I said, they didn't wake up today saying, hey, I want to fail, but they may not have the capacity. I wasn't the guy that was going to be the developer. So I went and got my MBA, and I took a different route. Yeah. And as leaders, it's important for us. I know you and I used to refer to it as a slow, painful death, right? It's like, look, if an employee is starting to fail at their objectives and the things that they need, we need to coach it, but we also need to identify, is that capacity there? It doesn't mean they're a horrible person. They're a great employee. They've got great skills, but maybe not in this area. And quite frankly, it can be the same job they were very successful at a year ago, 2 years ago, but now the job somehow outgrew them, or it's pivoted a little bit. And as leaders, it's important for us to identify that early. And when we say back and support, it doesn't mean allow someone to hang on in a, less than optimal place until all of a sudden, not just I know it, but that slow, painful death is everybody above me in the company knows it, right? So act fast, act swift, find the right place, do everything we can to put them in a successful place. And when you do that, I look back, we talk about relationships, and I talk about people that I've had to part ways with. And guess what? Yeah, there was a period of time that maybe there was a little bit of sour grapes, but now we're great friends. I talk to these people all the time, and I'm so happy when I see that, they left and all of a sudden they found the right spot, and they work a lot. They're less stressed. They don't have to work as hard, and they're overachieving because they're in that sweet spot.
Yeah, I think that's, I think that's a really powerful thing when you're leading people, because it is it's kind of I have this thought around like morale as an example, right? Team morale. There's no such thing as team morale. There's individual morale, right? Then it all stacks up together, right? There's that old kind of that saying about, one bad apple, blah, blah, blah. But it really is all about the art of, the individuals. And I love the idea around support doesn't mean you just keep letting them fail. If they're not in the right role, one of the biggest favors you can do for them is to help them go find the right role.
Yeah, exactly.
And then one of the things that I'll tell a little story here. So we happen to be at this company in Utah, and one day my phone rang, and you called me, and I was here in my home office, which looked very similar in those days to the way it looks now. And I picked the phone up, and you said, "Hey, dude, there's this opportunity in this company for this role that could be a step up for you. I think this would be something cool for you." And I took a pause and kind of went, I had an OS moment and kind of thought, so, did I miss goal? Have I missed goals? Am I out of here? Should I get a box? What are we going to go do? And it took a moment or two to unravel it around, your comment to me, which stuck with me forever. And I've since done this with many other of my employees. It's like, no. One of the things that I should be doing is watching out for you. And even if getting better means you leave my team, my job is to help you get to those steps. So first of all, it's a thank you for that moment in time, because it led me through many other paths in my career, even though I didn't leave when you told me to. But I just kind of curious about, as a leader of leaders, right? And a leader of managers, when you're thinking about, their well-being, and you're looking down, you're seeing things they can't see yet, because you've either been there and done it, or you've, it's experience and things that that are coming that they don't know about yet. How do you kind of balance that watchfulness, right? To present them with opportunities and ways to grow their career and be better. How did you pick up that skill?
I had a manager early in my career, Ron Porter. A lot of people know that name. I worked with him at a couple companies, and he was always a role model for me for looking out for others, and he made me aware of positions, and I remember how cool that was. And again, it gets back to that early acknowledgement or understanding in my career that it truly is about the people. And we had at the Novell days when we were talking, we had a team that I would probably argue was one of the tightest teams that I had ever had the privilege of working with. And, there was no movement. Everybody was happy. We were all working hard. We all had friendship, but I know I wanted more, and I wanted more from my people, and we can all sit idle, but I knew that folks like Mike Lutz and folks like Israel Force and John Reeves and all these folks from the past, they all had much more to offer than they were giving in the capacity that they had it in my team for 2.5 years that we all worked together, and sure enough, as soon as we started to branch out, and you look back over their careers now, and Israel, I think, just left senior VP position at Salesforce, and Mike Lutz has had incredible leadership, careers, and these guys have really excelled. And I guess I've always felt that, I don't remember who said it, but if you help enough other people get what they want, you'll get what you want. And I wanted these people to be successful. And I also, it's much easier to attract top talent within an organization if outsiders look in and say, wow, everybody that goes through Dolan's organization seems to get pretty good jobs. Everybody that touches Dolan ends up here. There is a self-serving reason behind it. It does help backfill and build teams, but it's more about the people. You want the people that you work with. We spend more time with our people, our work folks, than we do with our families. And I want the best for them, right? I want them to be successful, but I need to be able to backfill them with the same caliber of people. And it's a cycle. It really is a cycle.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That's very true. I think it's been fun to watch over the years, kind of the careers of our team, our companions, and other individuals that have gone through my organization, kind of progress in their careers and become other the directors and VPs, and go get bigger aspirations and be able to do cool things for their families, which is awesome. So.
But those are the things you look back on, and you're like, those were your successes, right? Like I said, the companies are all gone, but the people and they're thriving in their families, and you watch them grow is in their careers and grow as human beings and grow as, contributing to society, and the things that they value, all of a sudden you value, even though you may come from very, very different backgrounds. We've got some folks that, we couldn't have been born any different. But at the end of the day, our core values, just drive these strong relationships that last, forever. And really, again, as you're building a team, core values is, that is not, you can't you can't weight that too heavy, right? And when I say values, that's hard work. That's win together, lose together. That's, trying to understand that life balance and caring about the other person's life balance as much as yourself, and doing your unfair share to make the team successful. Those type of values, all of a sudden it's you quit worrying about who's doing less than you, right? It's, hey, I want to do more than everybody else. And if everybody's trying to do that, great things happen.
Yeah, that's true. It's funny you say that, because I think of a time when a bunch of us were getting ready to travel abroad. We were going to be going to other countries in places that we'd not experienced. It was part of our role, and it was part of your organization, and we were, being sent out to go do a bunch of stuff that was not easy to go do. And one of the things that we did, and I'll kind of lead into the question around this, and one of the things that we did that you brought to us and encouraged us and actually told us we were going to do this, was we all got a book. And in the book, we learned a lot about recognizing the differences in culture and the individuals that we were going to go spend time with, so that we understood them better, so we could be more effective. And not that everybody that's listening to the podcast is tomorrow going to get on a plane and go to Singapore or go to Germany or go to all the places that I got to, kind of was blessed to have a chance to go to all these different countries and do these things. But, one of the not every leader of a leader is going to provide that kind of insight. So if I'm a leader or manager listening today, and I'm trying to figure out what does it mean to manage a diverse, manage a diverse team, to go travel, to go do these things. What couple of steps should I take to prepare myself so that I can be better at it? It's kind of a loaded question around the book, but it's also incumbent on that manager, that leader, to take steps on their own action to get better at what they do. So what kind of things can I do in my chair to go get better at it?
Yeah. And you talk about reading books, reading and continuing to educate yourself, is important. And, it's interesting as you read, and we read as a team in that case, that my dad and I read a lot of the same books, and they're historical books. And, I bring this point up because it's very interesting. When we get done and we get on the phone and talk about it, you would think we were reading two different books, because he reads it for the historical value and I read it for the leadership style of the people at the time, right? Yeah. It's like completely different. And that's okay. That's awesome. Yeah. Right. But, educate yourself, acknowledge that you're not always going to be the smartest guy in the room, and that's okay. Right. And there's a lot of decisions that are made that are not right or wrong. It's an either or, and we'll get there either way. And it's, as a leader, pick those battles, right? Give those that you're working with, give them an opportunity to win, right? If you call all the shots and you're afraid for them to fail or for you to fail, they don't get that chance, right? You can't win if you don't give them the ball. So give them the ball. If you don't trust your people, that's a time when you need to really start reflecting on yourself and ask yourself what you've done. Because it's not, like I said, nobody wakes up wanting to fail, right? And if there's a trust issue and you don't feel that you can empower someone to take on a needed responsibility, it's time to self-reflect and understand why that lack of trust is there. And again, it's wrong person, wrong job, wrong place. Typically is the issue, and something needs to change. But, again, continue education. There's a lot of information out there, on management styles. And look, there's not a right and wrong one, right? You can read 20 books and you're going to get something good out of all of them. And you're going to get some stuff that you're going to kind of, shake your head at and wonder what's that really all about, right? Yeah. But find a style that is going to work for you, and motivating your people is important, right? I had a recent GM that I worked for that his philosophy was you can pay them, you can love them, or you can put fear in them. And I think personally that's a horrible approach, right? Yes, pay is only a motivator for so far. Loving your people is, that is a motivator. If people know you care, but the fear thing is, I think it's an implorable approach to managing people, right? Nobody performs better under fear. They may work longer hours, but they're not going to be as efficient and effective. You're never going to build somebody's morale by putting fear in them. And again, if you're at that point, then you need to, as a manager, start to look and say, is this person in the right place? Right. And what are we doing here? But, but there are books out there that probably came from a book, right? Pay them, love them, or put the fear in them. Yeah. I personally don't buy into that philosophy. And so you got to read a lot of books to get the needles in the haystack and the things that are really going to work for you.
Yeah. That's great. That's great advice. And I think that, there's kind of we were talking earlier about 3 tiers in our careers, right? There's coming in, there's those that are those that are just getting going, and they're suddenly in this CEO role or VP role or director, whatever the role happens to be. There are those that are just looking for something to do, and who are the kind of the tail end of all of it, just kind of going, so how do I impart this wisdom and what can I do to help these other people? And there are those who are just kind of stuck in the middle because that's just kind of where they are. And I think it's the across kind of all 3 of those bands, right, in your career. There's great value in don't give up on learning. Go learn something every day, even if it has nothing to do with what you're doing. Go figure something, go read something new, go put some new brain cells, connect some new synapses, and keep going. So.
Yeah. And look, help others, man, help others, right? Giving back and coaching and mentoring is a good way to keep your skills sharp, right? So that the skills that you have acquired, don't go stagnant on you. So find someone that needs help that may not even know they need help, and they may not even need to know that you've taken them as a little project. I shared with you earlier, and I got a little part-time gig here going, and it's I've got a manager or a supervisor that's been trying to be a manager for a long time, and as he asked me what my ambitions are, my goals, being at this point in my career, is it didn't necessarily come out and tell him, but at the end of the day, after talking to him, my goal now is to make him a manager, right? And there's a lot of self gratification that you maybe don't get during your career as you start to continue to really focus on building others, and you hope you do that throughout your career. Right. It's about building others, but you get to a point in your life where you have you're fortunate enough to have the time and the energy to work with people and help some people that they're so close, and all they need is someone to just give them a little bit of a nudge and give them a little bit of tweaking in some of the things they're doing, and it all comes from the experiences that we've had, and there's so much gratification that comes out of that, and so getting that gratification is, I think that's the key to longevity in a career, right? If you're not finding that satisfaction, money is only going to last so long, right? I mean,
that's true. Money does not equate to success.
Motivator.
That's just a part of it. Money is merely a measure.
Most leaders don't realize how much performance they're actually leaving on the table. This is not because their people aren't capable, but it's because everything else depends on them. That's a leverage problem. In Lead with Confidence, I show you how to build a team that owns execution so results scale without adding more pressure. Grab your copy. The link's in the show notes. Now let's get to the podcast.
So,
it's a measure, and it's a necessity, but it's got to write down there a ways to get that life fulfilling career.
Yeah, right? Very true. Well, I'm gonna wrap us down on our time, and because we're here and we're coming up on about a half hour, And I am grateful. There's two things I'm going to ask of those that listen to this podcast. The very first thing is, if you enjoyed the conversation with Bill, give the podcast a like, or share. This is a new season for the podcast and a new season in my life too. And the second thing is if you know one person or two people who could learn something from listening to the content, listening to this conversation, share this with them and ask them just to take a couple of minutes to listen to the wisdom from Mr. Holzendorf on this podcast and the lessons that he's brought to you today from his decades of career and the successes that he's had. So third thing is, thank you. Just thanks for doing this, man. I'm grateful for you, always grateful for you, and glad to be a part of your life, and you're a part of my life, and glad that we're here.
Thanks for listening to this week's The Next Interview Show podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast and then take time to turn what you heard here into action.